So we have reached our final lesson in our Epistemology Unit, and today's class was about a man named Alan Turing and artificial intelligence. Now, I consider artificial intelligence the epistemological issue of the future, but before we get into the future, I'd be remiss not to mention the man who I feel made that possible, a man named Alan Turing. So I'm thankful for him for pioneering the world of today and beyond. Now, Turing was not a philosopher. In fact, he was a mathematician, but a mathematician of the highest genius. And he was born in 1912 in England, and there's a couple areas I want to focus on. His Turing machine of 1936, how he cracked the German Enigma code during World War II, and the Turing Test, and a very unfortunate and unnecessary ending to a war hero and a genius. Living in England at the time, it was against the law to be a homosexual, and Turing was a homosexual, and he was found out to be. And the punishment put him on a series of chemicals, he was coerced to take these chemicals, and it caused him so much duress, he eventually killed himself in 1954 by injecting cyanide into a poison apple. So again, this war hero and this genius committed suicide way too young. And there was a movie in recent years, The Imitation Game, that I thought did a very good job telling the Turing story. And let me address a rumor, and some of my more computer savvy students ask this. They say, hey, I've heard that the Apple logo was because of Turing. And again, Turing died by eating a cyanide-laced apple. Now, Steve Jobs denied this to be true, and it could be. You can see that Steve Jobs, another genius, would pay homage to a genius that came before him. But again, as of now, that is speculation, total speculation. So let's start with that Turing machine I mentioned. Now, in 1936, he came up with this machine that could simulate any computer algorithm, no matter how complicated. Now, algorithms nowadays are the be-all, end-all, and I think you've learned that in your math class. Now, this machine, and you can look at it, way, way, way ahead of its time, used a series of ones and zeros, and to this day, binary computer codes use a series of ones and zeros. Really, it's the first incarnation of a modern computer, and he came up with that. But more important than that, you could argue, was his cracking of the Enigma code. And again, making this in the 40s, how elaborate is this? Is absolutely remarkable. And the Germans had this machine here, the Enigma machine, that was considered unbreakable. So Nazi Germany were committing atrocities, as you learned in your history class. You know, I don't have to get into it. And it was thought impossible to break their correspondence. Turing's machine was able to do that, and it's speculation how many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of lives he saved from this, and remarkable contribution to society. But again, we're in history land. This is a philosophy class, and this is the Turing test, which brings us to the philosophy of it all. And the Turing test is fairly simple. The human questioner asks a series of questions to both respondents. After the specified time, the questioner tries to decide which terminal is operated by the human respondent and which terminal is operated by the computer. And this idea he came up with in 1950. That's a long time ago. He foresaw a future where computers and machines just become increasingly more powerful and increasingly more a part of society. And in class, we simulated that a little bit with Cleverbot. Now, Cleverbot's a lot of fun, and you click on cleverbot.com, and you correspond with the computer. And if you didn't know it was a computer, would you be able to tell it was a person or not? So I didn't give you the backstory of it, and I'd say, well, this is somebody who's corresponding with you on the other end. Could you tell it was a person or a computer? Now, if you can't discern, this is more to the Turing test. Now, this idea has permeated pop culture for a really long time, all the way back to silent movie days with Metropolis, which it was an AI idea. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I'll reveal my bias. But Blade Runner, 1982, remarkable movie. It's exactly this idea of artificial intelligence, all the way to recent years with this movie, Her and Transcendence. And there's many, many more. This idea has permeated pop culture for a very, very long time. Now, here are the philosophical questions. And this is the tough stuff. And question 1. Will there ever be a computer invented that can interact with a human where the human won't be able to tell it's a computer? Now, this has all sorts of philosophical repercussions, especially if we created it to look like a person. And you couldn't tell whether it was a robot or a person. Could we ever get to that point? And if so, how do we proceed ethically? How do we proceed epistemologically? Tough question. Now, here's a question. Will computer and man ever be merged into one? And I want you to envision a future where, let's say, you are going to Brazil and you don't speak Portuguese. You will have some sort of USB port in your brain that they can upload Portuguese instantly, and you can go to Brazil no problem. If we can ever get to that point, is it ethical? Should we go down that road? Question 3. If computers reach a level of sentience, should they be given the same rights as humans? And first of all, we have to define what sentience is, and therein lies a question in and of itself. But let's say hypothetically they do. Do they receive the same rights as humans? And this one is a question of the future. And I want you to predict what the computers of 10 years, 50 years, and 100 years from now will be doing. Will they be a positive? Will it go too far? At what point do we cross a line, if at all? Now, understand, you're young, but how fast computers have gone in my lifetime is remarkable. And I think it's safe to anticipate even more changes as the time comes. And again, these epistemological questions which are merging into ethics, these are questions we're going to have to address as a society. So to wrap up class, the journal entry is this. Is it conceivable that in the future there will be computers capable of thinking? Now, if so, what is your definition of thinking? What constitutes thinking? What separates human thought from that of a computer? And also in your journal, I'd like you to include, based upon the class discussions and your own thoughts, your 2 cents about these questions. So again, the future is interesting. There's no doubt about it. But this future that's going to happen and this incredible world of today would not have happened without Alan Turing. And me, I am grateful for him. And thank you for watching.